the key question, I think, at the moment, everyone would agree, is how serious the Pakistan state is at the moment about establishing its authority and fighting the Taliban and Al-Qaeda, whatever those phrases mean, or whatever the Taliban means. And it's quite difficult to work out. I mean, in the past, under General Musharraf, we had all these years of ambiguity and uncertainty, and he insisting that his men were losing their lives in this struggle, and that the West didn't appreciate the efforts that Pakistan were making to tackle the Taliban. And then back in this summer, a ramping up of the military offensive in the Swat Valley and elsewhere, suggesting that what had happened previously wasn't terribly serious compared to what could be done, and certainly a much more serious fight. But even now, questions as to whether Pakistan actually means it, whether it will be sustained, and whether the fight is actually going to be completed. There are quite good reasons for thinking it won't work out terribly well. I mean, if you take the view that a Taliban-run Pakistan wouldn't be a good thing, and there is ambiguity in the security system in Pakistan. There are many people who have senior positions who are by no means religious extremists, but who are strong nationalists, many more strong nationalists than religious extremists in the army and the ISI and so on, and they do not see it the way we see it in the West. They just don't see it the same way, and they think that India is taking advantage of Pakistan's weakness at the moment. They think the United States is abusing their ally in Pakistan, and that they're fighting on behalf of others, and that it is not in the Pakistan national interest. You also have to wonder if Musharraf, who basically is a pretty Western-minded man and was governing as army chief, with much more authority than Zardari has as a political leader, if he failed to get a serious battle underway with the Taliban, how much more difficult must it be for a civilian administration which is weak politically and which doesn't have control of the army in the way that Musharraf did? How much more difficult must it be for Zardari to do it? On top of which, this is clearly going to be a very long campaign. I mean, even if you accept, as I certainly do, that the number of Pakistanis who support the Taliban is a very small percentage of the population, it is a huge population. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands or millions of people who share the ideals of these pretty extreme religious guys. So there is a very big force to be dealt with.
There are a number of websites and blogs that are that appear to support this nationalist element within the security services, and which I tend to follow because it helps me understand what this crowd is thinking. And one of the things I find interesting is that there still appears to be an attempt within the Pakistani security infrastructure to separate the good Taliban from the bad Taliban. And the Batullah Masood and the TTP, which is the Pakistani Taliban movement in its Urdu acronym, is consistently considered or referred to on these websites and in the statements by the Pakistan military as the fake Taliban. They even go so far as to suggest that India is behind this Taliban. Which is sort of sweet in a way, but and possibly not entirely unrealistic. But the Swati Taliban, Mullah Fazlullah, they're convinced is another fake Taliban, and you hear this all of the time. And these websites will also continue to say that, Jalaluddin Haqqani, who the Americans have been trying to take out from his base in Miramshah, is really not such a bad guy. He was quite a good Taliban. He was quite a good mujahideen. He even worked with the CIA quite closely. Can't we all learn to get along with him? Shouldn't Hekmatyar be brought into the political equation of dealing of, couldn't there be a political solution with Hekmatyar? And so there is this constant, and I'm not trying to throw out a bunch of random names of people, crazy people who live along the border, but it does seem to be this attempt by the Pakistani security services to separate the good Taliban and the bad Taliban. And to me, that reflects an intention to try and, essentially juggle a hornet's nest, which I think was reckless policy when the Americans pursued it in the 1980s. I think it continues to be reckless policy for the Pakistanis. And I think I would only go on to say that I do think that the concerns in Islamabad and Rawalpindi that New Delhi is trying to destabilize things further are not completely unfounded. And I think one of the things that the Western governments could and should be doing right now would be to put some pressure on India to try and ratchet back the pressure so we could refocus the Pakistan military's attention on the common enemy that we all face.
Pakistan Army has changed in a sense that up till 98, when our bomb was not out in the market and not everybody knew that we have a bomb or we don't have a bomb, Pakistanis needed Americans on their side. Now, I might be extremely wrong, but my feeling is that Pakistan seriously believes that Americans will not last here for very long. Give it a couple of years, Obama will be heading towards his last year in the in his presidency. Americans will have lost a lot of people, British have lost a lot of people. The rest of the Western world, does not want to be in Afghanistan. So if Americans are, basically are seen to be losing here, this region will be left the way Pakistan actually wants to run it. They know that Iran is playing, pretty solid game with the Americans. They are talking to them, they are on board, they are not on board. Russians and Chinese, will definitely like America to be seriously beaten in this. Pakistan is only concerned how India will play out, and that's why whatever they are fighting in this region, we are fighting the American war. Okay, fine, you give us money, we give arm, and for that reason, I think they're doing a pretty solid job. Losing their men here and there, Swat. I personally believe that that was an operation which was created for the Western world. Fazlullah or his son or father-in-law or whatever, the Premier League guy was recently caught, Muslim Khan. Our report was that he was in Islamabad for 8 days, negotiating with the guys. Whether negotiation was happening in Islamabad or in Mangora, we are not, clear. But the thing is, when his associates have spoken to the Pakistani media, that listen, Muslim Khan and his 5 associates were in Islamabad trying to cut a deal about Swat. We feel that something seriously wrong has gone in Islamabad. They have been detained. So that's why we're talking to the Pakistani media. Media, broke out the story first, and then the military went ahead and said, oh, yes, we have arrested him. And that's why we said arrested or detained. Maybe that was ruse to speak to senior guys like Fazlullah or Sufi Noor or whatever his father-in-law's name is. I think, whatever was happening in Swat was not as serious. I know Pakistan Army has lost a lot of men there, middle-ranking soldiers. But, again, the way earlier mentioned, confusion about who Pakistani, Taliban are, whether Baitullah and people who have associations with Al-Qaeda and have a wider agenda, and then the Swat people who actually want to work within the confines of the Pakistani constitutional apparatus. They are seeking the Sharia. They are not against Pakistani state per se. They said that, we actually want to run like mullahs. Just let us be like mullahs. We want to do this, that, whatever, shut, music shops, kill women, whatever. Thank you very much. But we are not against the state. Baitullah Masood and his associates were fighting a different war.